We're all good this morning. But I want to read to you out of 1 Corinthians, and these are the words of Paul, starting with verse 29 out of the 7th chapter, and we'll go to verse 35. And it says this: "What I mean, brothers and sisters, is that the time is short. From now on, those who have wives should live as they do not. Those who mourn as they did not. Those who are happy as if they were not. Those who buy something as if it were not theirs to keep. Those who use the things of the world as if not engrossed in them, for this world in its present form is passing away. I would like you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs, how he can please the Lord. But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world, how he can please his wife. And his interests are divided. An unmarried woman or a virgin is concerned about the Lord's affairs. Her aim is to be devoted to the Lord in both body and spirit. But a married woman is concerned about the affairs of this world, how she can please her husband. I am saying this for your own good, not to restrict you, but so that you may live in a right way in undivided devotion to the Lord." Now, by no means am I telling people to get divorced, or Paul is, and I'm thinking, Paul's telling me to be single. I just celebrated my 20th anniversary. I missed something somewhere, right? So we think about this, and I kept thinking, well, what is Paul trying to tell us here? Because obviously, people are not going to just become single. But he's saying it is better for you to be single because you will have less distractions. You will have less things to take your mind off of God, and you can focus on God. So I started to think about all of these things that take our focus away from God. Even if it is the issues of our marriages or the world or our job or just all of the little things that take away our time. And it could be something that we don't even pay attention to. I don't know about you, but how many of you start to look for something, you're at work or you're at home and you're like, I need to look something up on the internet. And you go to look that thing up, and then an hour later, you don't even know what you're looking at anymore, right? Because you're distracted. And you get online, you're like, I'm going to go look, I need to buy this thing. And then the next thing, an ad pops up, so you click on that, and then you click on something else, and we go down these rabbit holes. And we don't know where the time went, and we forget what we are doing, and we get so distracted. And it shifts our attention away from God, away from these spiritual things, and puts us in this materialistic ideal of what the world is telling us it's about. And we can think about this in a lot of different ways. And I know I've said some of these statistics before, but I think they're important to revisit here. They said that in 1976, a grocery store stocked 9,000 items. Now that same grocery store today stocks over 40,000 items. I mean, think about that. How many choices we have. Or think about when you go to the grocery store, how distracting you are, especially if you go to the store like I do and you're hungry, right? Because then you get distracted by a lot of things. And there's a business plan. When I was in undergraduate school, we took this class, and it talked about how everything in the supermarket is strategically placed to catch your eye. The colors they use, the wording they use, the fonts they use, what time of the day you're in the store to where they place different things, what's on sale. It's all geared to distract us from what we really need, so we end up buying a lot of things we don't need when we leave that store. We're always told that if you just buy this thing, if you just have this thing, if your relationship is just this good, you will find contentment and you will find happiness. Everything is geared to get a response from us, whether it's real or not. Even something as silly, I've been reading online lately, that Skittles. Now, I don't know if anybody read this, but this is devastating to me, right? They said that the Skittles flavors all taste the same. Now think about that. Like, no, I like blue Skittles, and I can taste the apple or whatever it is. But they said all that is something psychological that tells us that it's green and it smells like apple, so it's got to taste like an apple. But they did these tests where they blindfolded people, and I don't know if they made them not be able to smell or something. They all tasted the same, whatever that may be. I don't even know if that's true. See, I went down a rabbit hole, and now I'm disappointed in Skittles. And I got distracted from what I was supposed to be doing, okay? but it's geared to a response from us to say, you have to have this, or to fool us into thinking about something. But why does this distraction, why does this matter to God? Well, it matters to God because it matters to our spiritual lives, because this damages the priorities that we are supposed to have. It keeps moving God down the list of things to do for the day. Every time we get distracted, God gets moved down a notch, until God is at the bottom of the list, and I forgot to connect to God that day because I was distracted by so many other things in my life. It is tough, and it takes away from us. It calls us our attention to realize that we might love some other things more than we love God. But yet, if you remember the greatest commandment, which we're going to talk about throughout this year, we are called to love God first, love God with everything we have, and then we can love each other. Nothing in there about loving the world, nothing in there about loving the things we have, nothing in there about all these distractions that take our focus away and let us know that we truly aren't happy. All of these things are not designed to make us happy, even though the world tells us that. So God says, I am the one. I am the focus you're supposed to have. Come be with me. But we are a greedy people, right? And I don't mean that like, oh, we're all greedy. I just mean, yeah, we're all greedy, right? And that we want what we don't have. If I just had this other thing, I will be happy. Oh, I thought I was happy until I saw this thing. Or look at what my neighbors have, or whatever it is. We're just bred to want. We're not bred to be really content that much because the grass is greener on the other side. We're always distracted by something else that looks better than what we have. But again, if we can just rearrange our priorities and take away those distractions, we'd realize that we have plenty and we have God by our side. One of these things I've tried to do since the beginning of the year is watch less news, right? Because no matter what you turn on, you're going to get some biased opinion about it. But I've noticed something. Since I have watched less news, I have been less distracted and my attitude has been a little bit better. Right? I haven't really been as negative, or it hasn't really been the fear that has bred into you to not be content or not be happy and to focus on all of the bad. So that attitude has been a little bit better, which by default I think has helped some of my relationships go a little better. And that's exactly what we're designed to do with this greatest commandment, is to say, if I can focus on God, if I can put God at the top of the list and drown out all of the other noises, even though it is hard, and we tried that for 2 minutes this morning, and you still hear things that are going on. But if we can focus on God and love God, well then by default these relationships will be better, and I'm not going to care about what we are missing. Because even in relationships, we get greedy. And even in relationships, we judge what we have by what other people have or what we think they have. So I can have 80% of what I need, but then I look at somebody else and say, wow, I'm missing 20% or I'm missing 10%, and I want that. And so we think that we can't be happy until we go out and we get that extra 10 or 20%. And then sometimes people leave relationships or cheat on their spouses or whatever that may be because they want that 20% because they think it's going to make them happy. And then it's not long till they realize, wait a minute, now I'm missing 80%. We're not geared to think that way sometimes. We are geared to say, all right, God is here and God will fill me up. God will enhance these relationships. But again, it is hard. We are told that we need these things. Again, a statistic that you might have heard. And this boggles my mind. It says that in today's world, with the internet, the radio, the billboards, television, that we come into contact with almost 4,000 advertisements a day. 4,000. I mean, I don't know how that's possible, but I believe it. Because, think about everything we look at and we see. It's gear. Even now when you watch television shows, it's just one big advertisement for something, right? Without us even realizing it, we're being advertised to. And they're all claiming the same thing. You will be happy if you have that. But now, think about this. Think if we came into contact with God 4,000 times a day. Think about if we focused on God just a fraction of the amount of the times we're being advertised to. Or if we just quiet ourselves a few moments during the day to listen to God whisper, imagine how those distractions would fall away. What if we quieted and made it a priority that we can say, okay, God, help me listen to your voice? Because God speaks to us constantly. Everybody wants to know, how do I hear the voice of God? How do I know God is talking to me? How do I know God is here? Well, very simple, be quiet, right? Be quiet. Let your mind go to God instead of being distracted. Now, I am preaching to myself this morning because this is hard. For me to sit silently for 2 minutes is tough. If I was not standing up here in front of people, I would have been distracted even more, right? It is not easy because it's a loud world we live in. There is always something competing for our attention. But God says, pay attention to my voice. Listen to my spirit. Be still and know that I am God. Or I think of Elijah up on the mountain, which all of you know that story where Elijah went up there and he thought God was going to be in the thunder and the earthquake and the loud wind, and God showed up in that still, small voice. So what does that tell me? It tells me that Elijah had to quiet himself in order to hear God. What does that tell me? It means that I have to put the distractions away in my life, even though they are tough and I want them sometimes, in order for me to hear the whisper of God, to find the source of the quiet. And then I keep thinking of Mark chapter 8, verse 36, where Jesus says, what does it gain if you gain the entire world, but you lost your soul? Think about that. This is a spiritual matter of life or death. We may not think that. We may think that this is just the world we live in and we're distracted. But when we build ourselves up this fake world and have no place in for God, we lose our soul on a lot of different levels. There's a t-shirt out there that says, he who dies with the most toys wins. Right? That's the mentality of the world. Well, I saw another t-shirt once that said, he who dies with the most toys still dies. Right? We still die. We still go before God. Am I distracted? Is God down on my priority list because I'm letting all the noise of the world distract me from God and instead of doing what I need to do? This is about our spiritual health, not necessarily the material health that the world wants us. John Ortberg, one of the authors, in one of his books, I can't remember what book it was in, but he talked about how from times we are little kids, from when we are like 1 year old, and you can recognize McDonald's, right? And I know, and I'm not saying this is a proud parenting moment, but one of Eden's first words was McDonald's, right? She always wanted to, she could spot the golden arches before they were even on the horizon. I do not know how that worked. But all kids are like that, and they want the Happy Meal, right? They want the toy that's inside the Happy Meal. They think that, if I can just have this Happy Meal, I'm going to be happy, because McDonald's isn't just selling a meal, they're selling happiness, right? Contentment. And of course, I don't know any kid that's ever got a Happy Meal and was content very long. And he even says that, the author says, I've never got to adulthood and heard of a kid going up to their parents and saying, Mom and Dad, I just want you to know that I'm 40 years old now and I have found lasting happiness and contentment because when I was 6, you bought me that Happy Meal. Right? That doesn't happen. It doesn't. Now, our Happy Meals get more expensive as we get older, and we keep thinking we need something. But that's not what happens. You want to know when I really hear some things? When I'm at funerals a lot, right? When I do these funerals, people will always talk about the legacy people left behind. And this is what shows me that sometimes we need to pay attention. Because a lot of times you will hear the adult children say, one of the best things my parents showed me, or my grandparents, or aunt, or uncle, whoever it was how to find God. Was how to live my life connected to God. That is something that lasts forever. That is something that helps us understand that we are supposed to connect to something bigger. Now imagine if we can leave that legacy for all of the people that we come into contact with, so that when we die, they can say, they helped me understand that God needed to be at the top of the list. They lived their life in such a way that they did not get distracted by the world, but they lived for God. Again, that is tough. That is tough. But that is what we are called to do. So as we understand what our spiritual lives are supposed to be, we need to quiet ourselves from the world and take a step out of it for a while and say, okay, God, where am I? What are you doing? I don't know how many people here ever really think about spiritual warfare, okay? And I know this is something that is debated theologically, and I'm not sure exactly where I fall out on this, but I believe there's things out there that take our distractions or take our lives away from God. And C.S. Lewis, I don't know how many people here have ever read any books from C.S. Lewis, but C.S. Lewis wrote years ago, and he wrote one of the books called The Screwtape Letters. Has anybody ever read that book? Okay, a few of you. Well, The Screwtape Letters was this work of fiction that C.S. Lewis made, and it is told by the perspective of a demon, right? And the demon and these devils are scheming on how to get people away from God. So the whole book is about this, what this demon named Wormwood was supposed to do to distract that person from God. And that's exactly what he says. And he's like, you tried all of these things. Some of them worked and some of them didn't. But you know what you were successful at? You were successful at taking their mind off of God. Because when they are not thinking of God, they are not working for God. When they do not have God in their mind, God is not in their mind. So they make other choices. Right? So if we don't make choices, choices will be made for us whether we know that or not. Whether or not you believe in a physical devil that tempts us or not, there are things in this world that are purposely taking us away from God so that we will stay distracted and stay discontent so that we will not fulfill that greatest commandment and love God and love each other. Because you know what happens when we love God and we love each other? The world changes. We change. We find happiness. We realize that we have had everything that we need to be happy right there all of the time. If we can just quiet ourselves to do that, to find the source and connect to that source of happiness and contentment. So this morning I want to leave you with a challenge. I want you to think on God. I want you during this week, I challenge you to take 5 minutes out of your day, 5 minutes, and be quiet. Whether you're driving in your car and you turn the radio off, whether you're in the shower, whether you're washing the dish, wherever you find yourself that you can do this. 5 minutes to where you shut all of the distractions off. Now, 5 minutes may seem like a long time at first, and your mind's going to go. Your mind's going to wander. But I guarantee you, if we keep trying, if we keep saying, this is when I'm going to make time for God, God will show up. And those distractions will become less and less. And then something powerful happens too. You realize that we need less and less. That all we need is to breathe in God and breathe out the world. To breathe in this spiritual life that says, come and breathe into me, God, and help me to be happy. Help me to be content, even though everything around me tells me I should not be. But we're not looking at the same thing as the world. So we are looking for God. Can you do that? That's up to you. Some days will be easier than others. And there will be some days where you say, I'm making time for God, and then the phone rings, and then you have to do this, and you got to go shopping, and we got to-do lists. But still try to keep God there. Because amazing things can happen once we connect to that source of quiet, that source of peace, that source of contentment in our life. God is good all of the time. And we know that because we know that God is the only one that has never given up on us yet. So may we walk with God in this life that tells us we should be walking with a lot of other things. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you. And we thank you that we already have the knowledge of knowing where happiness and contentment comes from. But Lord, help us to see it from the right side. Help us to see it through your eyes and through your heart, what true contentment and happiness is. And it will be a journey, and we will go up and down and peaks and valleys. But Lord, if we stay focused on you, if we listen to the way you whisper to our hearts, we cannot go wrong. So wherever we find ourselves this morning, whether we are very distracted or whether we are connected to you, help us. Help us to stay there. Help us to move towards you and to bring other people along so that we can build this kingdom that has the knowledge of knowing where true happiness comes from. And all of God's people said, and if you'll please stand as they close us in this song.